Yes. If any of you don't know me, my name is Mark Littlewood. I'm the Director General here at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and welcome to this inaugural Free Enterprise Group with IEA Growth Forum. Before getting proceedings underway, if I just make a few housekeeping points. If you've got one of these or anything like it that's liable to make an exceedingly irritating sound, please switch it off or put it to silent. Bathrooms, there are two toilets here, one up the stairs and one immediately to the right for gents. There are far more elegant bathrooms downstairs on the other side for ladies. That's the sort of commitment we have to equality here at the IEA. You'll also find on your seats a number of handouts and publications. There's an invite to our annual Hyatt lecture next month with Professor Erna Ostrom, the Nobel laureate. That's a free public event, but literally many hundreds have already signed up. So if you want to come to that, please sign up as soon as possible. You will find our progress report, which gives an overview of the IEA's work over the past year. I think on every chair there is a copy of the Self-Employment, Small Firms and Enterprise, a recent IEA publication about how we can help small businesses. On some, but not all of the chairs, is a copy of Sharper Axes, Lower Taxes, which is the IEA's plan for a truly comprehensive spending review. If you don't have one and there isn't one on your chair, there are some copies on the desk outside by reception, so please pick one up if you'd like one of those as well. The government's deficit reduction plans, of course, depend not only on fiscal consolidation but also on economic growth. And the coalition plans to stimulate the latter have been, we think at the IEA, somewhat piecemeal, somewhat sketchy at times. If we find ourselves in a pattern of economic growth between 0 and 1%, as opposed to the 2 to 3% originally hoped for at the start of the Parliament, not only will the deficit grow, but unemployment will remain high. So the Institute of Economic Affairs has tried to put forward some radical, bold thinking in the areas of deregulation, taxation and the like, and is encouraging the government not just to make the right noises in this area, which David Cameron took some steps towards last week, but also to embrace the right policies. We at the IEA think much more needs to be done to liberalise employment law, lower the red tape burden, particularly on small businesses, and bring down taxation, particularly where there is good evidence to believe that current taxes are on the wrong side of the Laffer curve. We've got a lot to get through today, 4 sessions and only 2.5 hours to save the entire economy, with I think a total of 16 speakers. So if I can just say that when we get the panels underway, I'll ask each speaker to speak for 3 minutes, at which point this bell will ring, and when it gets to 4 minutes, the bell will ring continually. And I hope that will mean that we've got time for questions. But just before we get the first panel underway, I'd like to introduce Kwasi Kwarteng, who helped to organise today's Growth Forum. He's a member of the Free Enterprise Group, and if you'd like to know more about the Free Enterprise Group, please talk to Kwasi or Elizabeth Truss, who's sitting in the front row, who is the convener of the group. Kwasi, say a few words to us.
Thank you very much, Mark. I just want to say a few words about the Free Enterprise Group, say who we are and why we came about, and also I should finish by speaking about the Growth Forum very quickly. Obviously, 2010 was a signal year. We had 147 new Conservative MPs, which was the largest intake in 80 years. And as an intake, we were very much interested in enterprise, in how we get economies moving, and in business generally. And I think the feeling amongst many people of our intake, of our generation if you like, was that the last 15 years had seen a massive growth in not only in the power of the state and its role in the economy, but also a shift in the thinking of people in Britain. I think that if you look certainly in the 80s, people were much more susceptible to kinds of free market ideas that are espoused by the IEA. And I think people had a more intuitive understanding, greater intuitive feel for how to produce wealth in an economy. And I think over 15 years, particularly with Gordon Brown as the Chancellor and then latterly as Prime Minister, we saw a massive expansion in the state and in state spending. And for many of us coming into Parliament in 2010, against this backdrop, I think it was decided that we should perhaps form organisations, form pressure groups, if you will, to try and restate the arguments in favour of the free market, to try and redress the balance, if you like, of British political debate. And it's very gratifying to see the kind of successes we've already had. We published 3 or 4 papers. They've all had extensive media coverage. And I think there's a genuine appetite for a debate in this country about the future of the free enterprise, for a free market, free society, and how people can actually develop business and how we can grow the nation economy. I just want to say a few words about the Growth Forum. It was quite clear at the end of last year that growth would be the big question of 2012. It was clear, I think, from the Chancellor's autumn statement that the OBR had some pretty ambitious growth targets. And if we're to meet those targets, we can't just simply bumble along. We're going to have policies, which I think the government is getting there, to try and meet those targets, to try and boost the economy, to try and boost growth. And as Mark suggested, fiscal consolidation is only one aspect of deficit reduction. In fact, it's only really a third. A third of the government's deficit reduction program is reliant on cutting in spending cuts. 2/3 of that, then, is reliant on growth. And as we go into the second quarter of this year, we have to ask ourselves, where is the growth going to come from? And so it was very apparent to myself and Liz and a few others that growth was going to be the big question of 2012. And we thought it would be a good idea to have a forum to discuss this. So thank you very much for coming. And I'll now pass you back to Mark.
Kwasi, thank you very much indeed. We're delighted that Sajid Javid can join us as well. Sajid was appointed as PPS to George Osborne in October of last year, I think, Sajid. And he's just going to say to us a few words about how the Treasury and the government sees the growth challenge. Sajid.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me, giving me this opportunity to make these remarks. First of all, congratulations for putting together this conference for both the IEA and the Free Enterprise Group, a group that I'm a proud member of. And you'd asked me, Mark, to say a few words about the challenge that we face, and I thought I'd focus on 3 major themes. First one, you already heard about the debt and deficit challenge. When the new government came in 2010, in the prior 13 years, national debt had gone up from 330 billion to 900 billion. Despite years of actually quite solid growth before the financial crisis that began at the end of 2007. And that in itself, as Kwasi has just alluded to, has led to a lot of the problems that we face today. And turning that big sort of economic tanker around is going to take a long time. And we've seen that already. The government's original plans to try and reduce the deficit, eliminate the structural deficit within the first term of this parliament is not going to happen. It's going to take longer, which means we're going to go into an election in 2015 with at least 2 parties, well, certainly one of them, arguing that we're going to have some more cuts. And that is, I think, a new territory, and it just sets out what the political challenge really is to deal with this. Also related to that, we hear very often from the opposition and others that actually we can afford to slow down the pace of cuts, and we should look at the example of countries like the US, where there are claims that they actually had a fiscal stimulus, and look at what's happening in their economy, and it is recovering faster than other economies. And that's just a complete myth. If you look at the latest IMF Fiscal Monitor report, it actually shows that in 2011, the US economy had a fiscal contraction of 0.8%, a bit lower than ours at 1.4% in total, but there was no fiscal stimulus. Yes, the US economy is doing better than most economies in Europe, including ours, but maybe it's got more to do with its flexible labour laws and other issues, but it certainly wasn't a fiscal stimulus because there wasn't one. And actually the same report shows that in Germany there was a fiscal contraction last year of 2.3%, but they actually had robust growth of 3%. So that link, I think, is a complete myth, and we should get away from it. The next big issue, I think, there's a challenge that we all obviously have seen on our front pages almost every day, is the whole Eurozone situation. Clearly, this is my opinion, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks is the can has been kicked down the road again. Each time the can's not going much further, it's getting heavier. It's going to get to a point, I think, very soon where you're just going to stub your toe. You're not going to be able to go any further with that can, and you're going to have to address the fundamental issues in the Eurozone, which aren't really being looked at by Eurozone leaders at this point. I think key to that is the banking system in Europe. Clearly the banking system is on life support. banks throughout the world, but especially in Europe, need to increase their equity ratios. They're not able to raise equity. They're only able to do that by reducing the size of their balance sheet, which means less loans to companies, to individuals, which is having a knock-on effect on Eurozone growth. And it has actually a bigger effect than, say, what happens in the US. Small to medium-sized companies in the Eurozone rely on 80% of their funding from their banking system, whereas in the US it's about 50%. So it has a much bigger drag on growth, and clearly if that's happening in the Eurozone, it's going to have an impact on us. So that's a really major challenge. And then the last one I wanted to mention, one that I don't think gets enough airtime, but I think actually is going to become a bigger issue over the coming weeks and coming months, is the rise in the price of oil and hydrocarbons in general. The oil price today in sterling terms is at its highest point ever. It's almost reaching its peak in dollar terms, just about $14, $15 off the level. And as a commodity trader, former commodity trader, I've studied for years the connections between commodity prices, especially oil prices, the impact on the global economy, including a very large globally integrated economy like ours. And so that is something that we need to keep focused on as well, and how do we deal with that? And it's not just to do with geopolitical factors. People point to what's going on in Iran and others as driving up that price. It's also to do with consumption, especially from the emerging economies. Just in the last decade, while the world as a whole has had quite sluggish growth, consumption on a daily basis has gone up for oil from 70 million barrels a day to 89 million barrels a day. And that's just at a time when actually world demand growth hasn't been at its peak. So that's another issue to keep an eye on. You look at those three things together, debt and deficit, the Eurozone problems, oil price, we really do have, I think, the biggest economic challenge in a generation, and that's why I think groups like this and what we're going to discuss today is absolutely key and critical. So thanks for coming together. Thank you.
Sajid, thanks very much.